Madam President, would you like me to call roll? Trish Bodie.
Here.
Gloria Gonzalez de Lucia.
Here.
Alexis Grimes. Aaron Johnson.
Here.
Jim McKay.
Here.
Christine Maurer.
Here.
Anna Smith.
Here. It is 6:17 p.m. and with the quorum of the board present, I now call the February 22nd board meeting to order. We will start with our opening ceremony, our Pledge of Allegiance before we stand. Let me introduce who's going to be leading us in our pledge tonight. Cadet Lieutenant Colonel Andres Gallego is the son of both Andy and Stephanie Gallegos. Cadet Gallegos is a junior at Leander High School, where he is the Cadet Corps Director of Operations and also a member of NHS. After high school, he hopes to attend Texas A&M to pursue an education in computer science. Please join me as we stand and Cadet Gallegos leads us in our pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our communication announcements portion of the agenda. Superintendent Gary.
Thank you, Madam President. As Winter Storm Uri ripped across Texas last week, what I noticed most in our community was the way that our one LISD family came together, supporting each other, and definitely better and stronger together. Especially as the storm began to wind down, the people of our community began reaching out to one another. In particular, I wish to recognize our Williamson County Emergency Management team led by Michael Shue. Their entire team of emergency responders stayed both connected and worked tirelessly throughout the week to meet the county's needs, and we worked with them very closely in particular. Our own internal team has done a phenomenal job in assessing needs and creating plans to reopen school once again. Our emergency management team is connected with multiple jurisdictions to solve many problems and create opportunities for help in the community. Some great moments in the week as Danielson Middle School partnered with Hill Country Ministries to provide food packages to over 200 families in a drive-through event on Sunday. There were board members there to assist and provide much needed support. Our child nutrition staff prepared and distributed 2,908 seven-day meal kits for free just today. This is 40,712 meals delivered today at the 9 middle schools. This was twice as many as they anticipated, and yet they were able to be adaptable and flexible enough to provide meals to everyone who needed one. Our maintenance crews have been working tirelessly to assess buildings and begin necessary repairs, which has enabled us to announce that we will be open on all but 4 campuses for in-person learning on Wednesday. Giddens Elementary School, Steiner Ranch Elementary School, Mason Elementary School, and Running Brush Middle School will remain virtual for the remainder of this week as we continue to assess damages and do necessary repairs. We will continue to update the community on our progress throughout the week. Our SCR team has worked diligently throughout the week to let our community know where we are and how to connect to help and services. Just today, we had 15 pallets of water delivered to Vandergrift High School from the city of Austin, and those will be distributed to our campuses. And there are many others who have been working really hard behind the scenes to make reopening and recovery possible. And we know that there's been multiple layers of stress for our students, for their families, for our teachers, for our staff members, and for the school district as a whole. And we want to recognize that and know that we are here and listening to the needs that are out in our community, and we'll do everything in our power to meet those needs. Teaching and Learning has been working hard to prepare curriculum updates and resources for teachers as we adjust for the remainder of the year. And we will have a more detailed update on Thursday night during our regularly scheduled board meeting. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Gehring. Board members, any remarks?
So I have a couple, Madam President. Putting on my resiliency trainer hat, this is for all of us here in attendance tonight and also those that may be watching via the live stream. As Dr. Gehring alluded to, the hits just keep on coming, and the stress continues to build in our community. Though so many have been able to step up and help our neighbors, many of us continue to struggle. If you're having a conversation with somebody and they tell you that something bad has happened to them, please do not say to them, "I know how you feel," because quite honestly, you don't. Instead, ask them, "Tell me how you feel about that," and listen for clues that they are in crisis. If you hear those, make sure that you find resources, stay with the individual, talk them through, but do not just blow it off by saying, "I know how you feel," because we don't. Something else you can do to help yourself as well is to ask for help. Ask somebody for help. When they do help you, tell them how much easier or more efficient or how much better their help was to you. Give them a sense of accomplishment in doing that. These are the ways that we help each other through the continued stresses that continue to keep coming at us. We have to look out for one another more than just fixing pipes and getting water. We've got to take care of each other's mental health as well. Thank you for your time, Madam President.
Board members, anything? All right, thank you very much. We'll be moving on now to the citizens' comment portion of our agenda. Please note this format is not a conversation, so there's not going to be a back and forth discussion. We'll ask that your comments respect that limitation, and as such, please refrain from directing comments about an individual by name who would not be able to respond. Our board operating procedures enumerates further requests, but I'll just sum up by saying we encourage polite and professional conduct. You have up to 3 minutes to address the Board of Trustees, and we'll hear a chime when your 3 minutes are up. We do have one individual who has signed up, and she is ready for us. Miss Jody J. will be presenting to us this evening.
Hi, how are y'all? First, I'm going to say that on December 20th, I had a stroke at home, and so my speech has not come back to me completely. So I'm a little nervous about speaking because I've been at home and going to speech therapy and trying to get better. This little guy, who is a first grader at Aiken, was the person who saved my life by realizing that I was having a stroke and noticing that I needed help. So this little guy. So I'm here today, first of all, to say that y'all, the hit keeps coming, and the Leander ISD is doing an amazing job to keep our kids safe with COVID and also with the last week, and we really appreciate everything that y'all have done, and I know it's tough for y'all and the teachers and the community, and I acknowledge that. For a little over a year now, we've been coming to meetings and talking about Aiken Elementary and the zoning of zoning, and you know, we've really been speaking about how we want to have the kids have some there's my stroke stability in their school, and Aiken just really has had too much change over the several years, and our community has spoken and said what we really wanted to say, and y'all have listened to us. 1680 and the plan that you will get tonight really is what we wanted, and really is going to keep our kids at Aiken, keep our kids who have already had 3 different or elementary schools over the last 6 years in the same place, and we really appreciate that. And I know it wasn't easy to get here, and I appreciate the staff that listening to the community and all the comments that the neighborhood gave. And I really just want to say that we support 28B that you'll be seeing tonight. And we want to say thank you for listening to us. And if you need me to come back on Thursday to say vote for 28B, I will, but I hope you do. So thank you very much. You want to say anything?
I want to stay at Aiken.
Well said. Very clear. I heard it. Excellent. Thank you so much, Jody. Thank you. Thank y'all so much. And that wraps up our very precious citizen comments. We'll move on to our public hearing. We have nobody signed up to testify for this. It's the Texas Academic Performance Report and public hearing portion. We'll still take a small pause, though, to make sure nobody signs up while the presenting is going on. Don't forget to press the button. There we go.
I do that every time. Thank you so much. It's good to see everyone this evening. This is our annual report. It's the Texas Academic Performance Report that the state publishes every year for every district and every campus within the state. And so this is our 2019-20 report that we're going to be sharing this evening. So we're going to be sharing a summary of this report, and we're also going to be conducting the public hearing, which meets the requirements of the Texas Education Code. So as you can see on this slide, there are numerous components to this report, and we have linked all of the various components here for anyone who would like to review these to a greater depth. So we want to remind everyone that this is not new information that is included in this report. It is from 2019-20, and in some cases even prior to that year. So when we get information throughout the year, it is very customary in Leander ISD, as you know, to look at that information and determine what that information tells us as that data comes in. And we certainly don't wait till the summative report of this to look at. But we do want to share everything that is in this summary this evening. So we will start. One of the things that we look at within this report is we look at what I call the people data, the student and staff demographics. And when we look at this for 19-20, we had a little over 41,000 students in membership last year, and that was an increase of over 1,300 students from the previous year. And when we look at our ethnicity of our student groups, our white and our Hispanic are the two that make up the largest population in our district. We did stay, even with the increase, we did stay within 2 percentage points within all of our ethnicity student groups, as well as all of our different programs from the previous year. You will see another piece within this report, and it's our performance, and it's very traditional from our STAR performance. As you will know that we did not have STAR in the spring of 2020 this past year, so this will not contain information from 19-20. So the information that you see in the performance section of this report is actually from 2018-19, and that was reviewed and shared with you in the TAPA report last year in February. This is what we look at when we look at for our graduates. We are looking at students for our 4-year and our 5-year. So in our 4-year, we're looking at our graduation class of 2019. So they were the 18-19. And so we're looking at those that received their diploma by August the 31st of 2019. We're also looking at those that received their Texas Certificate of High School Equivalency, continued high school for that year, for 1920, or dropped out. And we also look at that for that 5-year group, for that cohort. And as you can see, almost 100% for our 4 and 5-year longitudinal classes, they are almost at 100% with a very small percentage of dropout. As we move into our district staff summary, you can see that we had a little over 3,500 professional staff last year in 1920, and over half of that was comprised of teachers. About 30% were educational aides and auxiliary staff, with 12% professional support, including nurses, librarians, of that nature, and then 3% of campus and district administrators. We've also included here the teacher ethnicity percentages, just as we did for our students. So the entire report may be accessed on our LISD website, or you may go to the Texas Education Agency website for the report as well, and you may look at any campus within the state. Information may be found within those reports, and if you have any questions, please reach out to myself. I am Brenda Cruz, or to one of my colleagues, Emily Gray, and we will be more than happy to help you with any questions.
We still have nobody signed up for public testimony? Okay. So board members, any questions? Brenda, thank you so much for presenting this. I do have one question. This report, it's covering 1920, right?
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
So then when I see the percentage of students with SPED and 504 were over 20%, are we trending up? Are we maintaining or trending down?
They actually remained within 2 percentage points from the previous year.
So I need to set that for a sub-pops, but for SPED and 504s combined, that's also remaining within 2%.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Anybody else? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to our consent agenda. If nobody has a motion to remove any item, I just need then a motion to approve.
Madam President, I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
I have a motion from Jim.
Second.
Second from Christine. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 7 ayes, no nays, motion carries. All right, we'll move on to the COVID-19 update.
Thank you, Madam President. So just a reminder that we've been a little distracted this last week, but we do still have COVID. This data is from before, so you can see the data is from February 11th. The teacher data has not changed much, the staff data, very small changes here. Our student attendance data, we are gaining very slowly at the elementary level, but you see there that we dropped several secondary students. And if you notice, our in-person number of secondary students changed significantly. Part of that, I think, has to do with the rise in cases of COVID over that period in the end of January and the start of February. We still have about half of our kids in person, though. You can see from this, if you look down the number of cases in those 2 student cases and staff cases columns, that we peaked in the end of January, and those have been dropping significantly since then. Some good news from Austin Travis County Health in particular. Dr. Escott is particularly hopeful about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, partly because it's just a single dose, and so they'll be able to get it out and about much quicker. We are hoping that our remaining 1B staff that are on our 1B list will get vaccinated very soon. I know that Williamson County is focused on trying to make sure that that happens as quickly as we can get over the winter storm and get back to the regular vaccination schedules. We're still continuing to listen very closely to our staff and our teachers and our community and trying to respond adequately to all of those needs that are out there. Again, we just want to make sure that we thank all of our staff for everything that they're doing in this situation. You know, it's funny, it's become normal for us to be masked up. It's become normal for people to carry this little black thing around and try to get it on the microphone when they come up to speak. It's normal for us to clean up after ourselves, and you know, that wasn't normal more than a year ago. And so it's just been fascinating how quickly and easily people have adapted. But we have a lot of folks who are really going out of their way to make sure that our schools can stay open for in-person learning. We still have a lot of our central office staff who are out and about on campuses helping to keep schools open. And so we just want to constantly remind ourselves that that's not normal. They're trying to do their regular jobs at the same time and maintain the foundation so that once COVID starts to wind down a little bit, we can get back to the job of teaching and learning. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Not so much a question, but a comment. It's no secret that I've been intimately involved with the COVID-19 response for just over a year now. As of today, we had 35 cases. 1 year ago today, we had 35 cases of COVID. Today, we crossed 500,000 deaths. Dr. Gehring, the staff has done an incredible job in this Herculean effort to try to give our students and our community some sense of normalcy through what I said earlier, the hits just keep on coming. This comment is actually directed to our community, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the teachers, but speaking about the teachers, if you really want to help the teachers in the classroom, put a mask on, wash your hands often, practice good social distancing, and let's all work together to be part of the solution. With the vaccines coming out, there is a tendency for folks to think that this is over and we can start gathering in large numbers without our masks. With the variants that are out there, and I'm speaking of data that I work with every day, these variants can come back and haunt us. We cannot let our guard down. Please mask up, wash your hands, practice social distancing. Do that for our teachers so that they can do what they need to do for our kids. Thank you.
One quick question for the teachers that are not in the 1B list. Do we have an idea of when they'll get their vaccines?
I have not heard any update on anything beyond 1B. John, have you heard anything different? So I'll just repeat what John said. So the county will continue to follow the state guidance on the lists, but we have no further information at this time.
To that end, something that I would like maybe for us to consider as we move into the legislative session is sending a message to our legislators in Austin that it's time that we elevate our teachers to the same status by law as other first responders. Something for maybe a future meeting.
We have a legislative update on our next agenda. Also, I'd like to point out the EVAP, and I can't remember exact name, but it's the committee who's looking at the stages. If you're wanting to do a letter, you might want to combine it, board, but we can have that discussion when we have our legislative update discussion at our next meeting. Dr. Gehring, I'm curious about our pre-K, our early enrollment, and our kindergarten kiddos. I understand that's kind of where most of our enrollment was down. Do we have an idea on when we'll have a better indicator on what we think that enrollment might look like coming up, or do we have yet a date or timeline or a snapshot we can even get to the board?
I wish I could say yes, we do, but honestly, we don't know when those children will come back. So. You know, PASA is telling us that they'll be back. We're not sure that they'll be back, but we're doing everything in our power to find out who is in homes and not in school that could be in school in Leander ISD, and we will begin to reach out to those and personally invite them to come back.
When is our kindergarten roundup again?
I don't know the answer to that question.
March. All right, so maybe when we get some of those numbers back, we can get an update to the board of if we look like we're trending up or down or the same.
Yes, ma'am. We will make sure to keep you updated on enrollment.
Awesome, thank you.
And I heard that was, the kindergarten roundup was late March through April? Okay.
Just a quick follow-up question. Given the enrollment challenges this year in kindergarten, will that roundup include first grade to any degree, or are we focused on kindergarten per usual?
Jennifer's coming to rescue.
And some board members may have heard today in legislative hearings where lawmakers were saying if we're not incentivized, we're not looking for these babies. I think our district is, so this helps fully expand on that conversation, so thank you.
Yes, so our teaching and learning team has been really looking for those students who are not currently enrolled. We do have a little bit of data on who some of those students are. We will do all of our enrollment virtually, so students will be able to sign up for kindergarten or first grade or second grade from their homes. We will also have an ability in our schools for anyone who needs to be able to come to our buildings to do registration. So we're trying to provide as much flexibility as possible. The real push will be for our pre-K and kindergartners, but of course we are going to focus as well on first graders that we know we did not have into our buildings this year. We were supposed to have a meeting about that on Friday that did get canceled due to weather, so more information to come.
All right, great, thank you. All right, why don't we go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and then we'll move into the next item of our discussion items with the student experience. We'll be back at 6:53.
Hi, John, can you hear me? Test? Okay. They're working on it to try and adjust. If you leave your phone and your computer on. You want me to talk again? Oh, John, can you speak again? Yes, we can hear you. Yes, I can try and speak. Can you hear me? Test, test. He's still working on it. Can someone put his phone by the speaker? Hang on. He's trying to work on the system.
Or is there a phone number I can call? Is there a phone number I can call? Okay.
Okay, I'm going to turn off.
Okay, can somebody say something? Can someone say something on the computer?
Hi, John. Can you hear me? No. John?
Yeah, that's. I'll do my best, guys.
Let's just do it. I'll yell at him through here. Well, Elaine can call him and talk to him on the phone.
Can you hear if I hold you up to the speaker? Say something again.
Oh, that's going to feedback. No, don't do that.
No, actually try that one more time. Oh, okay, yeah.
I think it's on his end.
So I can't hear you guys, but you can hear me.
Yeah. Can you not hear us at all, John?
Just barely, but I can hear you just a little bit.
What if I talk really loud?
That helps. If you scream at me, that helps, yes.
All right, board members, we will now return to our agenda. We have a guest joining us remotely, And it's for agenda item 8C2. So without any objections, I'm going to go ahead and pull up our agenda item 8C2. Discussion of all matters incident and related to opportunities for refunding of certain outstanding bonds of the district for debt service savings, including a discussion regarding the plan of finance for the issuing of refunding bonds. And Elaine, do you want to introduce our guests?
I will be happy to. We have Mr. John Crumrine with PFM Financial Advisors here to present a refunding opportunity for the district to advance refund some of its outstanding debt to save approximately $60 million. So I will turn it over to John and hope that he can present.
John, you're up.
Okay, hi everybody, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I can hear you very, very poorly, so I'm glad you can hear me, but I'll do the best I can. Thank you for your time. I'll try to make this brief and to the point. Can you see my screen right now?
No.
Okay. Can you see the Leander presentation now?
Yes.
Okay. So we're here to talk a little bit about an opportunity that you have for a refunding transaction. I think everybody's kind of aware of what's happening in the markets lately. Obviously, interest rates are low, and so we will have an opportunity to sort of look at a refinancing for debt service savings. Again, my name is John Crumrine. I'm with PFM, and we're financial advisors to the district. We are a fiduciary, so when we bring you a bond transaction, we do think it's in your best interest. And I'll walk through some of the important aspects of the proposed transaction, as well as give you a brief market update. Just generally speaking, in terms of interest rates, tax-exempt interest rates are very, very favorable right now. Empirical rates or absolute rates are over here, so you have an opportunity to sort of look at, from a historical perspective, you know, one-year change, how much rates have actually gone down. I think the more telling sort of graph here is this table, or this graph right here, shows you the percentage of time since 2011 that the benchmark rate, which you pay, the AAA MMD, that's sort of your treasury equivalent on a municipal bond basis. This shows you the percentage of times that rates have been lower than they are now. So we are, today's curve is this blue line. So you can see that at the maximum here, you know, we're in sort of the 98th to 99th percentile of low rates over the 10-year period. If you expanded that out another 10 years, the same relationship would hold true, or it would be even more sort of compelling. So it really is sort of an interesting time. We have seen an uptick in tax-exempt rates this last week, but generally speaking, you'd still be in the 95th, 96th percentile in terms of this graph. Treasury rates, similar, very, very unique interest rate environment, as you guys are well aware. When you look at the 1 year, the 2 year, the 3 year, the 5 year, the 10 year, and the 30, only 9% of the time, 9.1 and 9.5% of the time since 2011 has the Treasury been lower than it is right now. And as you get to the short part of the curve, interest rates converge to nearly zero. So interest rates drive this proposed transaction. And just want to kind of give you a view of what you're looking at broadly over a long period or horizon. Your specific refunding that we're talking about right now is a taxable refunding. So we would refund tax-exempt bonds on a taxable basis. And the reason that that's potentially feasible is that taxable rates are still, again, so low on a relative historical basis that you could still do these transactions and save a significant amount of money. The bonds that we're looking at for refunding are bonds from your Series 12A, 13A, 14B, 14E, 16, and 17A series. The maturities from those particular bond issues are listed here, and the total par value of the bonds to be potentially refunded is about $135 million. The composition of that $135 million varies across multiple series. So you've got capital appreciation bond specific series, like in the 12A. You've got CABs and current interest bonds in the 13As, and then current interest bond only in the 14E, 16s, and 17s. I would point out to you that the asterisk is here to say that there is the potential to refund these bonds from the 16 and the 17A series on a tax-exempt basis. They are eligible to be refunded on 8/15/21 on a tax-exempt basis. There are some unique structuring considerations in this transaction that may make that not necessary. We may be able to achieve the same interest rate on a taxable basis that we can on a tax-exempt basis, but just understand that that situation changes on a daily basis. So this could easily be $120 million on a taxable basis, and then, sorry, $110 million on a taxable basis, and then about about $25 million on a tax exempt basis. But we're showing you the broad transaction generally to kind of give you an idea of the shape and the thing we're trying to accomplish with the transaction. So I'm going to show you statistics for the proposed transaction, but I want you to sort of keep this in mind. We anticipate and we are modeling for a $16 million cash contribution to transactions. So that would be $16 million from your INS fund as a contribution to a refunding. So effectively, you would be embedding a payoff, an outright payoff, into this transaction. And the reason that we would do that inside of this transaction is simply to save you from having to do a standalone bond redemption. So it's basically affecting two transactions together to save you money on fees for financial advisors, rating agencies, etc. It's just an efficiency technique that we do. I'm assuming, again, that this transaction is entirely taxable. I think I mentioned that we may be able to do a couple of series of this bonds on a tax-exempt basis, but I'm kind of showing you the broad brush here. I'm assuming that this transaction is marketed at AA, which assumes that you maintain your current ratings by S&P. And it assumes application for and receipt of the permanent school fund guarantee, which would make the AA rating, which would augment the district's underlying AA rating and make the bonds marketed at AAA by virtue of that PSF. Real quickly, if I can get you to look at this part, the upper right, sorry, I'm grabbing this. Come on, move. The upper right-hand side here. Scenario one is sort of the base case transaction. So we would look at a refunding of that same $134 million worth of bonds. We would issue $134 million worth of refunding bonds, or $135 million worth of refunding bonds. The estimated rates, as of the time of this presentation, we assume that you would borrow your refunding bonds, you would borrow at about a 1.826% rate, which would produce gross cash flow savings of about $89 million, or present value savings of about 63.1%. Excuse me, absolute PV savings of 63.1% and PV savings of 22%. This scenario two is simply provided to
Did we lose him?
It is a bit more back.
John? John, can you hear us?
Moving, then the market, but if the market moves against us 20 basis points, and again we would refund the same 134 million. It would raise the true interest cost, and you would lose savings. You would save about $80 million on a gross basis, or $54 million on a present value basis, and then the efficiency would go down. And percentage savings would go from 22 to about 19. But the interesting thing about that is the way we're engineering this solution, and let me get this graph in center here. The way we're engineering the solution is sort of interesting in that it would not impact your debt service. So your scenario one here is in the orange line. So your gray bars here represent your existing debt service. The refunding transaction, the orange represents what we think your debt service would look like after this transaction. And then the spotted or dotted gray line, the dashed black line, excuse me, represents the difference between scenario one and the shock. So you can see that in the first 12 or 13 years, you're actually indifferent, where the inefficiency or the loss of value manifests itself is out here, and it would increase your debt service payment in year 2039 by the $8 million. So we're engineering this situation, this solution to so that we create some capacity here, and then we create some potential flexibility in terms of debt service and tax rate and the ability to finance your new money. But then any efficiencies from this transaction would be out on the longer part of the transaction, where you would have a chance to potentially refund those bonds and save money in the future. The observations, why would we do this? Well, clearly, from a gross cash flow savings perspective, this is a pretty interesting number, a very high number. I think this would be potentially the most impactful. This would be the second or third most impactful transaction in terms of a refunding that the district has ever done. So this is a very, very unique opportunity. And on a present value basis, the savings are very, very high. You know, the minimum threshold that we sort of look at transactions is about 3% of PV savings. You know, you want to see 5 or 6%, and clearly you're multiple times through that. So this really is a pretty interesting transaction. Unlike some of the others that we've done in the past, what I think is sort of unique about this is that we're no longer taking massive payments off the existing structure and pushing them forward. We are actually still taking payments off the back and pushing them forward, but what we're not doing is losing a whole lot of flexibility. I think you're going to have the ability to have quite a bit of tax rate control with this. You'll maintain your ability to finance your new money. And so this is a pretty neat transaction. And if you sort of look at it, when we started this process in 2015, you know, we were sort of making big moves at the first because we had some goals, right? We wanted to achieve a 25% cap target by 2025. And we also wanted to be able to finance all of our new money. Well, we've gone down the path. We look like we'll be able to finance our new money and some considerable amount of money, new money afterwards, if you desire to. And yet we're still making very, very good progress on our cab reduction plan. So this particular transaction, we estimate it would reduce your cab debt service as a percentage of total debt service significantly, maybe 5 or 6%, or about $165 million. So about $165 million worth of debt service from your cab specific portfolio would be reduced, which that means that it would increase your current interest bond debt service significantly, but the net benefit to you between the two, one gets higher, one gets lower, and in aggregate, you would reduce your debt service obligations by about $88 million. So again, a very, very meaningful potential transaction here. In terms of the recommendation, why are we recommending this? I think we think that this obviously provides pretty meaningful savings and it accelerates your cabs. I mean, it's going to pay off some of your highest cost debt first, while not sort of impairing your ability to do the other things that you want to do. So this transaction increases the likelihood of you being able to achieve your cab targets by 2025. Interestingly enough, by carving out a significant amount of capacity in the early years, I think that this transaction is going to provide you with quite a bit of discretion around your tax rate. And it's going to give you some flexibility with regards to your future bond plan as well. So this is a pretty neat transaction in that I think you're getting a little bit of everything that you want to do. You're going to save potentially a lot of money, and you're not giving up a whole lot of flexibility to do this. So really, really excited about this. I think this is potentially another landmark transaction for the district. As we sort of think, how do we get to the finish line? You know, we anticipated giving this initial presentation on the 11th. Mother Nature didn't agree with that plan. So here we are on the 22nd. So I'm providing you this information now. I think we anticipate coming back with seeking official parameters approval by the board for this transaction on, I think the date is now the 25th, or maybe it's the 28th. Elaine will help me with that. But nevertheless, we would envision going to the rating agencies and having this proposed transaction rated in the middle of April, pricing it in the middle of May, and then executing and closing the transaction at the end of June. So that was a lot of information. I'm happy to try to answer some questions, although, again, I'll remind you that I'm having a very, very difficult time hearing what's coming from the board members. So, but I'm happy to try.
Board members, this will be on our agenda for our Thursday meeting for action. So tonight is discussion or questions. Elaine, for clarification, John won't be at the 25th meeting. So if they have if board members have questions, they can also follow up with you after tonight's meeting, correct?
Yes, or he can attend on the 25th as well. But any questions that we can answer tonight or before then, we'd be happy to.
What's the current thinking on the timing of the 2021 series that's indicated in the pro forma? Are we going to try and do these two transactions together, or what's the rhythm there?
When you say these two transactions, are you meaning a new money sale?
Correct.
Yes, so we will, we worked out the timeline this morning, and so in March, we'll be bringing you the proposal on what new money looks like, several scenarios there, and then both of these transactions would be wrapped into one pricing on the same day.
So for me, the takeaways are we save $88 million over the long haul, and we give ourselves greater flexibility in the tax rate, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Sounds like a good agenda item. John, can you still hear us?
I can hear you better than I have all night.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, this is a good thing.
Go figure. John, I remember I had asked you a question. You had told me, I believe, since our relationship with you, I think in the last 5 years, is that correct, that through the refundings we've saved how much, or reduced our, not saved, reduced our debt load by a total amount of how much?
Yeah, I think we're now in north, despite the fact that we've added several hundred thousand. Excuse me, let me pull this up real quick. Despite the fact that we've added, we've already bonded for, almost 300 million of the $466 million of the original authorization. Our debt service on a debt service to maturity basis is now about over $700 million lower than it was 5 years ago.
So over $700 million lower. That's just outstanding. So thank y'all. And thank y'all for bringing this to us.
President Bodie, I'd like to add that I'm going to work with John to create a report that shows the progress that's been made over the past 5 years, so that it's not just a comment in a board meeting, but we can give you some documents that show that.
That would be
change.
excellent. All right. Any other questions, board members? All right. Do we anticipate needing John back at our next meeting? Okay. All right then, Elaine, if we have board members, if there are any questions between now and our meeting on Thursday, please reach out to Elaine. Okay, thank you. All right, we will now go back up to the top as promised and start with our student experience agenda item 8A1. Consider approval of reimagining and expansion of online secondary offerings.
All right, good evening, Madam President and members of the Board of Trustees. So at the last board meeting we had, which I guess was January 28th, we went through this presentation and we discussed a proposal to expand our permanent online offerings to students at the secondary level, contingent on student interest. And at that time, you gave your unofficial blessing for us to move forward with gauging student interest, and we did do that. However, some unintended things got in the way, so we did have the student interest survey scheduled to go out last Monday. So we're working on getting that out by the end of the week. And we also had our family night, or our parent information night, scheduled for tomorrow night. So we have that rescheduled for March 4th. That's Thursday, March 4th at 6:30 p.m. So Basically, though, time marches on, and there are certain mileposts that we need to continue to hit as we plan for this in order not to screw things up for our 6 comprehensive campuses as they plan for the next year. So the facts as we're looking at and as we talk to people are that as we continue progressing towards an improved sense of normalcy, we all are pretty unified in believing that the best place in general for the vast majority of our students is going to be back in person as we head into the new school year. That being said, there are some students, and we have heard from them, we have yet to send the student interest survey out, that have, who have maybe previously struggled with attendance or with academics or with social emotional well-being, anxiety, that have been thriving over the past year, particularly this year with virtual empowered learning, and would like to, this would be their preferred method to continue learning. And we would like to be able to continue to plan for an implementation of that offering for our 9th and 10th graders and continue to offer online environments in 11th and 12th grade through our New Hope High School. So that is basically the bottom line. We are looking for approval tonight. We're looking for action tonight to approve us to move forward with planning for the implementation of an expansion with the understanding and the commitment that if the student interest isn't there, I'll come back to you and tell you that, and we'll probably not do it. If the student is there now, because any data we collect now is, the validity of it is going to be based on some of the current thinking from our families relative to COVID, even though this is not in direct response to COVID. So if a lot of people sign up for it now, and then as we continue and get closer and into the summer, people start dropping like flies and decide they want to come back in person, then we will come back with that information and make decisions about what we might need to do to adjust or decide if it's feasible to move forward with online learning. But tonight, in order to provide some clarity for our high school principals and for our system on how to plan moving forward, we would like and are seeking your approval to continue with planning for implementation.
I move that the board give administration approval to move forward with the expansion of current online high school offerings by planning and implementing the LISD Virtual Academy for the 2021-22 school year.
I second.
I have a motion from Gloria, a second from Anna. Remember, we did have these conversations before, so this was the follow-up or second conversation. Board members, are there any other questions?
I had one quick question, sorry.
Go right ahead.
Just because we've slept since then. If somebody was interested in this, but they want to do choir, this is not the program for them. Okay, I just want to make sure that's where we were still at. Okay.
And for those that take advantage of virtual empowered learning, do they still have access to mental health support through our counselors?
Yes, they do. We have our New Hope counselors our counselor that's working, that'll be ready for that, and we have our whole access to our ADAP teams and our LSSPs through Steve Clark and our Director of Counseling, so they'll actually get additional support.
So our New Hope counselor has traditionally serviced a finite number of students, and if this goes into implementation, that number could increase significantly. Do you foresee us, based on the success of this and the number of folks that sign up for it, that we would need to hire additional counseling support for the virtual empowered learning?
Perhaps in the future, but we are not looking to add on to next year's budget with any of those requests.
Thank you.
And do we have an estimation on how many students that you're thinking this might end up servicing?
Absolutely. We're going to limit it to 300 students total for the next year. So we are thinking 150 at each grade level. It could be a little more one grade, a little less of another, but we really don't want to go above that because we want to minimize the impact to as far as staffing and what we're going to need.
just making sure before we move on. All right, board members, I'm getting ready to call a vote. So, all right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. 7 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Matt, I think this is you again. You can sit there for item 8A2 as you talk about House Bill 3 proficiency plans and the goals update.
And I'm bringing back the ringer.
And a guest.
Jennifer Collins.
Awesome.
Our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum. So she will do the lion's share of the presentation. I get to jump in a little bit at the end for college and career military readiness. So we are here to give you an update on progress made and some data relative to the goals set forth in the House Bill 3 proficiency plans and CCMR college career military readiness goals. House Bill 3 has a whole bunch of stuff. You'll recall this is just an update on the early childhood reading and math proficiency goals and plans and the CCMR data. So I'll see if I can walk and chew gum at the same time. That is the purpose. Now, the House Bill 3 calls for us to report out on progress yearly. At least yearly. That's kind of the minimum expectation set forth to report out to our board. And early on, and in discussions with you, I think we all agreed that we wanted to hear back more often than that. So we are here to do that tonight.
So in the winter of 2020, before COVID, we had lots of meetings where we came together and we pulled data, we analyzed data, and we made some decisions about what we wanted to use as our data for House Bill 3, our district and our campus plans and goals. So you'll see here in the middle column what we call the intended data. This is the data that we intended to use for House Bill 3. And then on the far right column, what you'll see is the pandemic impact. There has been an impact due to the pandemic. We do know that we have large numbers of students who are testing at home, and there are different impacts based on the different assessments whenever our students are testing at home. Something else to note down in our very last row there, specific to PSAT data, students were required to come into our buildings to take the PSAT, so we did not have the participation in PSAT that we typically have. And so that's just something for us to note as we look at this data. We are going to look at it piece by piece, but there has been a pandemic impact. That's something for the board to note. So I know that you received a Friday update this last week with lots of information specific to early childhood reading and mathematics. So we're going to go through this pretty quickly, and if you have additional questions, we are happy to answer those for you. You'll see in the middle there, Leander ISD's 2019 baseline data. So in 2019, we did have 56% of our students at the master's level on STAR. So remember, I'm sorry, the meets level on STAR. So we have approaches, meets, and masters, and so we had 56% at that middle level at the meets level. Our goal for 2025 is an increase of 10 percentage points there, up to 66%. What's most in focus here, though, is our student groups. The data was provided to you on Friday for each of our student groups. So even though at the district level we're only looking at 10 percentage points gained, for some of our student groups we're looking at closer to 40 or 50 percentage points gained. So that's going to be our focus moving forward over the next 5 years. This data here is specific to iStation. I know that you're used to looking at iStation data. What we've done for you here is to put side by side the BOI and the MOI data for this year. So that is September data and then January data. For first, second, and third grade, you do see slight increases from beginning of year to middle of year, which is a good thing. We expect our students to continue to grow. We do see a decrease in kindergarten, but our kindergarten data at the beginning of the year was higher than we had ever seen it before. Our kindergartners, many of them did test at home, and it was their first time on iStation, so we do anticipate that a lot of the students had help from their parents at the beginning. Our middle of year data is right in line with what we've seen in the past, and so you'll see that on the next slide.
Our kindergarten parents are excellent readers.
So to me, this is the most encouraging slide in the entire presentation because this is historical data on iStation. We've been using iStation in our system since 2017-18. And we all have been asking the question this year, what is going to be the academic impact on our early readers? And what this data tells me is our readers are going to be fine. Our data for 2020, 2021 is very, very, very close to what we've seen in the past. We do see a couple of percentage points lower for a couple of grade levels. But I think that some of us wondered, would we be 10 or 20 points lower for our early readers? And we're just not seeing that. We're super excited about the progress that we're seeing with our students. So wanted to just mention specifically the spiraling in the curriculum, we believe, has made a difference here. We believe that our assessment framework and really focusing on teacher assessments has been key. But more than anything, I think that it's the time that has been given to teachers to plan for individual needs of students. So thank you again for that time on Wednesdays, that early release time. I believe that it's making a huge difference for our students. This last piece of data is data that we have never pulled before. It is new data for us now that we are using our student information system to report on our report cards for pre-K, K1, 2, and 3. We can pull data on that. And so what you'll see here are the percentage of concepts mastered for our pre-K through 3 report card concepts. What we note from iStation data and the report card data is that we see pretty strong alignment with both the approaches level and the meets level from STAR. So this is the early childhood mathematics data. Again, you had lots of information provided to you on Friday during the for the Friday update. In the year 2019, our baseline data was at 55%, and then our goal for 2025 is 65%. Again, we are focusing on those student groups where we see lots of need for growth for our student groups. This data here is on Dreambox data. Dreambox is a program where students have individual pathways for mathematics. Our dark blue color here is for students who are reported out on track, and then the light blue is for students who are potentially on track, so kind of an almost there, kind of a mark from Dreambox. We are excited as we look at October to December growth that we do see slight growth for most of our grade levels. Again, we do see some good alignment with our STAR levels as well. And then again, this is the report card data specific for mathematics for pre-K, K1, 2, and 3. And again, nice alignment with our approaches level and STAR.
Okay, so college career military readiness, we talked about that. Whoops. We've talked about our college career military readiness a little bit when we first presented the goals. Our baseline was for the ending report out for 2019, which was 86% of our students meeting one or more of the criteria for college career military readiness. And so the state goal being 60%, we still want to grow, of course. We're a continuous improvement district, so we have opted to set a goal to grow by 1 percentage point or more per year and reach that 90% or higher. Our goal, of course, is to hit 100% of our students leaving Leander ISD college, career, and military ready. We do think that is actually a reasonable goal. So when you look, I'm presenting some data here just to give you an idea of where we're at compared to where we've been in the past. So when we look at last year's seniors that left bar 2020, this data was from before the pandemic. We see that at that time, around December 2020, 62% of our seniors had passed or met a threshold, met the threshold for criteria to be considered college career military ready in both math and language arts on the SAT, the ACT, or the TSIA assessment. You see that 17%, an additional 17% of our seniors had passed one test or the other, either language arts or math, and then 21% at that time had not passed either. So when we look at this year's seniors, just a year later, we see that 59% of our students have passed both tests, both math and language arts. So that you can see obviously that's a 3 percentage point decrease. And where you find those students is in that 21% of our students who have passed one or the other. And then you do see 20%, so we're slightly down from last year in the percentage of students that haven't passed either. So there is I believe we're in the ballpark, and there is a reason, and there are some variables that have impacted. Jennifer talked about PSAT. In this case, I want to talk about SAT. Right before the lockdown, we did we were lucky. We did have the chance to test the juniors, that's this year's seniors. Last year, we had a chance to test all of our, or offer the SAT to all of our juniors like we always do. And that testing did occur right before the lockdown happened. But then what happened with the lockdown is our LISD students, they retake. And they retake and get better scores and go to, different cracking the SAT workshops and Kaplan and different things, and to bring their scores up. But College Board shut down last spring. And the testing was pretty much canceled. And then as it has come back online, there have been reduced opportunities to test. Our students are getting opportunities to test again and improve their scores, and that continues. That has continued in January and has spooled back up into January, February, not so much the last 2 weeks. So we believe we're in the ballpark there. And then when you look at overall what our breakdown was for college, career, military readiness with our 2018 and 2019 reported out data, you see that for that 86%, and I know it says 2018, you're like, I just saw that for 2019. It's a little confusing. You get your score based on the year before. But so there's the 86% in 2018, and hopefully Brenda's not shaking her head over there saying that I'm saying it wrong. She's not here, so perfect. All right. So the thing I want to show you there is that 72% of our students met CCMR based on passing both tests. 14% met based on some of the additional criteria, which you see there on the right now that I remember to click. And also notice that year over year, that 14% who met the standard based on these other criteria, based on getting an industry certification, based on dual credit, based on AP scores, based on any number of these things you see on the list, remains fairly constant. The other interesting fact that might show up this year is that within the blue bar, of course, there are plenty of students who have met based on more additional criteria. So they passed the tests, and they also have an industry cert, and they took AP classes. They were in on-ramps. So we anticipate that we will be right in the ballpark with where our college, career, military readiness scores are for this year. Do we expect a big jump? I would not count on that, but I think we are right in the wheelhouse with where we usually are. And if you see that 2019 data was up to 88% meeting the standard for CCMR. Jennifer, I think I was going to hand this one off to you.
Great. So our findings are that regardless of the data source, we do continue to see a gap between our student groups. So that really is our focus, whether we're talking about our early childhood data or we're talking about our CCMR data, we know that we need to focus on our individual student groups. So our next steps are that we do want to share the data with our principals. Our principals actually received both the district data and their specific campus data so that they can look at individual students to make sure that they're meeting the needs of each student. We will support principals with plans towards their campus goals. So not only do we have district plans, but each campus has written a plan as well. And so we are meeting with our principals to see what support they need. There is a pandemic impact on the plans that were written. And so we want to make sure that we're able to meet the needs of our principals. We will continue to refine instructional practices with an equity lens. We believe that that's how we can best focus on each of those different student groups. We do plan in May to provide you with some additional data through a Friday memo, and then in August we would bring you kind of that summative first year board presentation for House Bill 3 plans and goals. Any questions?
I have a few, but I'm going to limit myself to one. If we look at, I'm trying to translate from slide 9 to slide 10. So this is the mathematics portion. Slide 9 shows us the Dreambox Prediction Index, shows us the students, the percentage of students that Dreambox thinks are on track and potentially on track. And then in slide 10, we're looking at report card concepts mastered. And I'm trying to align what I see in slide 9 with what's being communicated in slide 10. And maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way, but I'll tell you how I'm connecting the dots in my own head, and you can tell me whether I'm doing that wrong and why. So for instance, if I look at first grade, I think you observed that the data is largely similar from October to December, so not a huge amount of change. But according to Dreambox, a little over 50% are on track, and somewhere around 80% are potentially on track. But if I look at the report card for first grade, it's saying that 88% are reported mastered and 12% developing. So I'm trying to bridge those, understand how those are connected, because in my mind, they don't connect very well.
Yeah, that's a great question, Aaron. So a couple of things to note about our report card standards. So each 9 weeks, we report out on 3 to 5 report card standards for each content area. So we do not report out on every TEAC. We work with our curriculum design teams, and which are teachers in our system, to identify which are the concepts that we believe should be on the report card. So that's something to note, that it's not every standard. But whenever we did some analysis, and this was shared with you on Friday, we do see a correlation in what Matt and I believe to be true, is that the report card concepts mastered, which again is binary, so did you master it or are you still developing? So it's basically a yes, no. That the yes aligns with our approaches on STAR, and that also aligns with both our on track and potentially on track for Dreambox. And that whenever we look at just on track for Dreambox, that we're noticing that aligns more with our meets on STAR. So that's a hypothesis that we have. Dreambox is a new assessment in our system, and so again, we're trying to see if those predictions will stick, but those are some connections that we made whenever we were looking at the data.
Yeah, just one clarifying question. In Dreambox, we're not evaluating anyone on the whole curriculum. We're just looking at the curriculum to that point, correct? So they're alike in that sense.
That is correct.
But in terms of performance levels, on track maybe masters and potentially on track maybe meets, or we'll have to wait and see where the data points fall. Is that fair?
Yeah, so this is our first time really trying to make an alignment for all of these 3 data points. And like look, some of them line up a little bit better than others. And like for third grade, for instance, you look at that December data and you see that actually when you look at the bar, that includes potentially on track, that's about 82, that is 82% of the students, which when you crank it over here and look at the students who have met a minimum standard here with our report cards, that's 81%. And then when you look at the STAR data for third grade, back, I don't necessarily need to click back, oh, we didn't share that, but it is 82%. And so first grade doesn't line up quite as well, but when the confusion or the clarification needed is when you're comparing a binary system that's either you met a minimum threshold or you didn't, versus STAR where you can approach, you can meet, you can exceed, and those are all considered passing scores. And then Dreambox, which has this meets basically, yeah, you're totally on track. You're probably on track, and then we didn't even put on here what if you're not on track. That's kind of implied by the 18%. But we think there is a pretty good, because when, Madam President, when you and I talked on the phone a couple of weeks ago, that really caused me to dig into it. And so when I got a few additional questions from Bruce, I was like, oh yeah, we've been working on this even while it was kind of cold outside, and just saying, wow, yeah, she's right. Why is our third grade score 86%? We always talk about these great scores we're getting, and then all of a sudden we set a goal and it's 55%. It seems like we're being disingenuous here. But then when we look at that goal itself as well, it does not, it doesn't talk about master's level, and having the gold be people who did not meet the standard is a little bit confusing as well, the way the state has set it up, because when it's not students who didn't meet the standard, it includes the approaches students, which by definition are meeting the minimum standard. That's how the state defines approach and grade level, and it actually used to be called satisfactory and is considered passing. So that just makes for some confusing data comparison, and that's why you got a 9-page Friday memo. I apologize for that.
I'd like to, as we go through this discussion on HB3 goals, work on a little bit of capacity building. And I'm not sure when the right time is to do it, but I really appreciated seeing the report card, the standards-based, because really when you started looking at individual students, there were some apparent gaps. And it just jumped off the page, whereas this, it's kind of masking a bit. I would love to understand more how our teaching and learning team takes this information and what they're targeting, how does it help in other areas, or what they're doing, or how this information plugs in, so we can start following along as these conversations continue and we keep building out on them.
Sounds like another 10-page memo coming your way. I hope not.
At some point. But
to
not
be
now.
thorough, because there are patterns that you can notice in the data and say, well, here's a certain student group is doing very well here, but we see a pattern of certain groups of clusters of standards or concepts and skills that maybe, one group may not be doing as well, and then we can look and work on figuring out why.
Well, just to start helping us look at what questions we can ask, anything we can get information-wise to help prepare us as we start asking questions, that would be great. Because I took it and I started looking at this and comparing to the average. I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna wait. I'm gonna follow up with y'all, and I'm gonna start working slowly on figuring out what this information is telling me about these different student groups. So, one question I have is in regards to, I see the different things we're using to measure students. So we have Dreambox and we have iStation. When I'm on the phone with different Texas trustee groups, I'm hearing reference to MAP. A lot of trustees are talking about they're using MAP to look at where their student learning is. Can you help me understand what a tool like MAP would do versus what these measurement tools are telling us? Do we have a disconnect? Do we think these measurement tools are doing everything they need, or have we looked at something else as well in addition to STAR?
That's a great question. So MAP is what we would call a universal screener. So it allows all of our students to be assessed at the same point in time and compared to national standards. And then you also can progress monitor with a tool like MAP and then track student growth over time. So iStation is actually a universal screener as well. So in our reading, we do believe that we have a universal screener. Is it the right universal screener? Maybe, but it is the universal screener that we've had in our system for about 3 or 4 years. For mathematics, Dreambox is not a universal screener. Dreambox is intended to be an intervention and instruction tool. And what they've done is they pulled a prediction index out of their instructional tool. So it's not based on an assessment, it's based on a student's path that they're following in the program. So we do not have a universal screener for mathematics. So we actually have an assessment framework in our system in Leander ISD, and we have a team of teaching and learning leaders that are coming together to look at our assessment framework this spring to determine what might a universal screener look like and how might it help in our system. So what if we had something like iStation type data for K through 8 for literacy? What if we had that for K through 8 for mathematics? So we do know a lot about MAP. We've actually been talking to other districts about MAP and how they use it in their systems. But we want to explore and see what other universal screeners are out there as well. And I do anticipate that we would be bringing a recommendation to the board for a universal screener in the near future.
And when y'all do, just to clarify, I'm not looking for more assessments. What we've got on our plate, but I'm just wanting to know, are we getting the data we need, or is there other tools we could use instead of the ones we are, right? Replacement.
Well, and even as we talked about alignment and what we see, we still have questions and want to make sure that we have the data points we need to accurately assess where we're going. And we have been talking about MAP a lot, like Jennifer said, so which does make me wonder if there are hidden microphones in the district office. I don't think that's ethical, but hey, whatever. It's all good. We don't have any secrets. We are excited to continue to research that. And just another advantage of it is just being able to point to a nationally normed, validated set of instruments that would provide us uniform, a uniform set of data from kindergarten at least through 8th grade. It's kindergarten through 8th grade, and and not have to jump around as much and be able to really, especially with that math, lean into the data. Dreambox wasn't built at all to be an assessment system. It was just built for interventions, and just this year they started putting out some analytics like we're showing to you at kind of an after the fact piece, and it doesn't involve assessing other than based on what students are working on a daily basis and just providing a report like a snapshot, a point in time.
So I don't know how many comments I have, just a couple, I guess. I've been on the board 5 years now, and I get access to this data and get to dig in deep, and if I have questions, I get to call folks and try to make sense of all of this. To Aaron's point, first of all, I don't know what potentially on track means. I'm kind of a binary guy. It either works or it doesn't. So the potentially on track as a measurement of student performance causes me some concern. But where I was going with that is I can only imagine parents of a kindergartner, their first child in school, trying to figure out where their child is relative to anyone else in the nation. I think this, if I don't understand it, I can almost be assured that our brand new school-age parents are going to struggle with this. If our peers and our colleagues in other districts are using a single standalone system like MAP that gives consistent information that we can compare not only across our peer districts but across the nation, as a measurement of where we are, I would be very much in favor of exploring that. Looking at Dreambox and then looking at slide 10, just it causes me stress because I can't reconcile those two. So I guess that's my comment.
I had a question. In regards to iStation, I've mentioned it before. I know a lot of our dyslexia students have problems with that program, and therefore, the results are not what it should be. So what are we doing to provide that extra other testing, but also are we able to support our teachers and so they understand, they notice a child that is struggling and then RTI starts right away. So I'm just curious, what does that look like?
I think that is my favorite question of the night because we do know that our students are more than one singular piece of data. Partnered with our iStation data, we have running record data on each and every one of our students. So that's when a teacher is sitting down listening to a kid read. And we believe that that is the most informative type of assessment data that there is because it's about listening to a child read. And so a tool like iStation allows us to red flag a student in an area where they may or may not be struggling, and it allows the teacher to dig in a little bit deeper, but it's really that running record data that is the most important data for our students.
So this kind of, in regards to that, the Friday memo I loved that you guys were you answered all my questions, so I appreciate that. But my one thing I did have is on there about intervention, it says intervention leaders have been meeting with campus support. So I'm just curious, how often are we analyzing those student records? What is the average time a student is staying in RTR or when they go to the next level? I'm just curious, what does that look like?
So we can definitely do some research and bring that specific data back to you.
Real quickly, are the SRP teachers able to give you data as well?
Absolutely. We have data from our SRP teachers. Typically, their data is at the student level, not so much at a system level, but usually you're looking student by student whenever you're looking at the data from the SRP teachers. But I will note that many of our SRP teachers are doing other duties this year. We have SRP teachers teaching kindergarten. We have SRP teachers teaching 3rd grade, those kinds of things this year as well due to our COVID pandemic.
Thank y'all so much for bringing not only just robust information about HB3 goals, but showing us other measurement points, other measurements that are going on right now. So we can see what learning looks like right now in the district on these different measurements. And it's not, like you said, it's not one measurement. There were several different measurements we could look at. So really appreciate y'all going that extra mile and giving us that robust framework to look at as we're looking at how our kiddos are doing. So, and it's considering the things that we've heard, I think this is good information. I hope we can keep getting better. So thank you. All right, we will move on to 8B1, Board Operating Procedures. Holly is not with us tonight, board members. But if you would take a look at your PDF, I'll point out a couple of things that have been talked about for our Board Operating Procedures update. One of them you'll notice is travel language that has been added based upon our auditor's suggestion. So they worked on that language and that will be put in there. The board meeting change has been added to reflect how our current board meeting structure is occurring. You'll notice citizen comments is highlighted, and that's up to y'all to further discuss, or you can reach out to Holly if you want. We've had some conversations about our citizen comment process. You'll notice when citizen comments come up, I'll tell them, please use polite professional conduct as enumerated in our board operating procedures, where here's all the procedures. So you can take some time to go through that. And one of the things I've noticed is we don't have it spelled out in here when board members give updates for the different committees they're on, whether you're on SHAC or your LEAF or you're in a diversity and equity, or if we want to do that during opening comments, or if we want to like put that in as an agenda item. I don't think an agenda item would be helpful necessarily because I'm worried it would just add length, and maybe we could just do it in opening comments. I don't know if we need to put that in the board operating procedures, but there you go. Are there any other questions right now? All right. Please continue to review. Let Holly know if you have any questions or if there's something in there. These are our board operating protocols, norms, procedures. So if you have any changes you want, just let her know so she can put in language for our meeting on Thursday. Otherwise, we will go ahead and approve changes then. And I would just ask to please look at citizen comments to see if you have any changes or things you want to make for there. All right, we'll move on to our next item. Board operations 8C1, consider approval of emergency declaration to expedite the procurement of facility repairs.
Good evening. In lieu of the winter storms that we've recently had, we're trying to be proactive and be prepared in the event we do need additional resources to repair any of our facilities. Under board policy CH Legal, it does afford that opportunity by if you have a facility that does sustain damage and impairs the operation of the facility and your normal purchasing methods don't allow us to get the vendors that we need to get the work repaired in a timely manner, then this allows us to take whatever action we need to get our vendors selected and get the repairs done. I will say, I truly don't believe we're going to need this, but as we've learned, it's good today and tomorrow it could pop, a line could bust. I mean, they get weak, and so you don't know until you run it, give us a week of sustained water pressure in these facilities and get the pressures up and down, you'll see different leaks possibly show up. And so we're just trying to be prepared and make sure we are armed and ready in the event that we do have a disaster show up at a school. And so we are asking for action on this tonight.
Board members, are there any questions? Bless you.
I think I have some general questions, really not necessarily related to the motion associated with this action, but just contextually trying to understand total cost of the repairs and the impacts of the storm, and to what degree insurance may cover some of those costs versus the costs that are going to be out of pocket. And so I don't know how you're tracking those things, and you don't have to tell me right now in the moment how that's happening, but I think for myself and other board members, I suspect there's interest in what that looks like and what the story is there. So again, don't feel obligated to provide detail on that today, I mean, unless you have something prepared that you want to share, but wanted to ask for that kind of in context around this, this agenda item.
Yes, we are tracking it under a special budget code to be able to track all the costs, and insurance has been filed. And we will say, as of right now, they're considering it one claim over the multiple buildings, so you do have a $50,000 deductible for this claim right now. And that's what TASB had said initially, and so we're waiting, but we're tracking everything.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Aaron's comments, and I'm glad to hear that we're tracking it under a separate tab, if you will. Maybe worth just an update once this thing is concluded. I'd like to see, where we ended up.
Definitely.
I'm just curious, when does this expire, if that makes sense? Like, are we going to be using the same, policy, say, God, what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah,
in
this
May
one,
or something?
as it states, it's for due to the recent severe weather event, and so it's going to be tied to any damage associated with this. Once we're done, then it goes away.
Board members, Holly Wardell was contacted. She said this language that's in here that gives the background indicators and the sample motion does work, but she also did forward over a resolution which has other language that pulls from here as well. So we have other options, but if this language works for us, we can go ahead and approve this motion now.
I move the Board of Trustees approve an emergency declaration allowing the superintendent and his designees the ability to begin repairs to district facilities due to the recent severe weather event per policy CH legal.
I'll second.
Have a motion from Gloria, second from Aaron. Any other questions? All those in.
I do have.
Oh, you do have questions. I thought you were going to vote already.
No, out of courtesy to Gloria, I wanted to second her motion, but I do have some additional questions. I wasn't aware that Holly had proposed some different language, so I was curious about what's different in that language versus this resolution.
It's the same thing, it's just pulled out. So like CHL, like she just writes it out in a resolution type format. She said this language is fine though, but we can have Sean distribute the resolution if you want to see that as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if there was other language. You alluded to different language. I wanted to understand what that was.
She pulled from here and wrote the resolution, she said.
Okay. So I think to the...
Sean, do you want to come up and confirm?
Aaron, do you want to see the other language before
Not
we vote?
Not necessarily. If
okay.
I was like... Just resolution language.
Yeah, it's just resolution.
Directs to the same stuff. I'm not too worried about it. I was just going to make one additional comment, like Anna indicated. I want to make sure that we put an expiration on it, or that we have a trigger or tickler to remove this at some point in the future. And like with the previous COVID-related emergency authorization, it would be useful, I think, to alert the board if the district has to exercise this authority that we're offering.
So just quickly, some context, and I was copied on the communications with Holly. She did send over language, which I brought in case you decided you would rather do this in a resolution format. Either format is sufficient. She's just taken that, as Trish has indicated, she took that language, pulled it out, and just articulated what's in the policy itself in CH Legal. As far as the time frame of the resolution, as Jimmy indicated, this would only be related to this, the damage related to this weather event. It naturally expires after that, but I certainly would understand, and I'm sure Jimmy wouldn't have any problem letting you know if they needed to exercise this authority and what damage it is that's related to that.
I don't necessarily want to make a modification to the motion, but maybe a gentleman's agreement or a person's agreement, that we get an update in 30 days of where this is for the possibility of formally terminating this.
We'll make sure to do that.
All right, we do have a motion and a second already on the floor if there's no other discussion. All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. 7 ayes, no nays, motion carries. All right, we have already done item 8C2, so we'll move on to item 8C3, discussion of Leander Police Department interlocal agreement, Third Amendment. I think last time I saw you, John, was at our last security meeting.
No, ma'am. You actually
yeah.
saw me
At Danielson.
at Danielson the
That's
other
right.
day
I
helping at
did
the
see
feeding
you.
site.
Doing a great job, too.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And we really appreciate everyone helping that afternoon. Good evening. This evening, we bring an amendment to our interlocal agreement with the Leander Police Department. The amendment will allow one uniformed officer at our regularly scheduled board meetings. There's not been any event, or do we believe that there is any harm to any of our meetings or to any of our trustees. But it is our responsibility as a department and as a district to continuously review our security and our safety protocols and procedures. And having an officer at the meetings would allow us to be able to better respond if there ever is an emergency event. And also, a uniformed officer does add an extra layer of prevention at any event that the board of or a board meeting, if anything was to occur. And so we are looking to amend the agreement to allow a uniformed officer at regular board meetings. Any discussion?
And this uniformed officer would be in attendance at the meeting or in the actual?
That is something we could still work out. We could have, the officer would of course be throughout the building, would be patrolling the grounds, would be at the entrance at the beginning and the ending of the meeting, would take regular visits throughout. We would also have our Director of Security, Russell Bundy, in attendance, and Russell would most likely be within the boardroom, and the officer most likely would stay out. But we would want to continually review and not make any determination where that officer would be at one time.
All right, and this is on for our next meeting for a vote?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so board members, any other questions?
No.
Just looking through the language, it looks like it specifies regularly scheduled school board meetings. Just wanted to be clear about the intention. I would take that at face value to mean our 2 regularly scheduled meetings a month, but often we have additional meetings, and depending on the agenda for those other meetings, I'm not sure if they're necessarily any different in terms of security requirements and whatnot. I mean, some of them maybe not, but just trying to make sure I understand what the mutual understanding is and what we're securing via the agreement.
So that is one of the items that we did discuss as a group. We actually had conversations with Sean as he was reviewing this, and with Leander Police Department. We understand that there are more meetings than the regularly scheduled meetings, and that would not, this does not prevent us from having officers at all board meetings, but we know that scheduled special meetings, they can be scheduled at times that are not always on the calendar, and the Leander Police Department would be here at any point that we need them to be here, but this guarantees that we put a calendar together where they know that an officer must be here that night. And if we do need them for other events, the chief has said that he will work with us very closely to make sure an officer is here at any meeting that we need.
And we do have law enforcement at sporting events, football games, things of that nature. So I get that this is the society we live in, and you can never be too prepared. I guess maybe I view it as a little bit of innocence lost, and it hurts me that we have to have these conversations. I'm less interested in having a uniformed officer standing at the door when our parents, especially those that are bringing emotionally charged issues where they're already feeling nervous. And how many times have we had citizen comments come up here and they say, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous to speak before the board. And I'm trying to reconcile, especially for our underserved communities, what the appearance of a uniformed officer at the door as they walk in to tell us that we're not taking care of them or their students in a way that recognizes the struggles that they may be facing. So I am struggling with it a little bit. Obviously, with my background, I absolutely understand preparedness. I just don't know if I am ready to say, let's have a uniformed officer inside the boardroom while we're having a meeting. Something I'm going to, as Trish would say, noodle on over the next several days. So just my comment.
I'll just add that I see it a little differently. I see it as a protection of all of our citizens, not just staff or board, or this is for all of our folks who are here. And so I guess I see it just a tad differently.
I'd add, I see it differently too. I see it as an opportunity to create relationships and create a safe space for everyone. I think our SROs on our campus have done a really, really good job of being a part of their community at their campus. And I'd hope that we could have some of that same feel here.
All right, thank you very much, John. Moving on, item 8C4, elementary attendance zoning discussion.
Okay. Good evening, Madam President, board members. Our tenant zoning process this time, as some of you may recall, some of y'all weren't here when we started the process, but the process changed for this zoning process where staff and administration worked with the community, got feedback, worked through scenarios, and had more town hall meetings, and then came back with a recommendation and got the feedback, and now we're recommending a scenario for approval tonight. And as we discussed when we started the process, we were going to look out more than just for this school. Typically, we'll look out one school past it. We actually looked 5 schools into the future for how the zoning would be impacted. And so we did a lot of exercises and just to really understand the impact and how someone else might be moving in the future and how they won't. So try to minimize some of the changes.
Just quick clarification, though, this is not for approval tonight, but approval next on Thursday night.
Thursday, correct. And so we worked real hard, which does create some challenges as you look out into the future, especially in fast growth areas. Your neighborhood codes can actually hamper you looking too far out because they're large blocks today. They don't have the kids, but they're projected to have a lot of kids in the future, but they're such large blocks. So anyway, I think the process worked very well. And so let's see, there we go. Of course, our charter that we did operate by, we did have the criteria, basically the 4 components to it. The theme was school size, proximity, minimize change, and then feeder patterns. As well, we do have the bilingual zoning process that is now starting to, they're working on those scenarios and working on through that data, because it's really tied to what we do with the normal zoning process. That's going to be the driver, the normal process, and then we look at where we have capacity and work with the bilingual program then in those schools. As we mentioned, we started out with 2 scenarios. This was for Tarvin Elementary, or Elementary 28, and then also Elementary 29 for 22-23. I'm not going to go every detail. I'll try to just summarize. Basically, the first scenario of 28A, what that did was kept Cold Spring and Hazelwood, or moved them to Pleasant Hill out of Aiken, and then moved part of Pleasant Hill up to Tarvin Elementary. And of course, the numbers were good numbers as far as for Tarvin Elementary, and then also relieved Aiken. And so that was one of our challenges, try to relieve Aiken. And so Cold Spring, Hazelwood are 2 large blocks, and so that's where we started. On Elementary 29, then what we looked at was basically to relieve Larkspur and Plain Elementary. And of course, you have primarily two subdivisions where 29 is going to be located. The Bryson subdivision south of Larkspur, and then Summerlin subdivision just to the west of Larkspur. And so you have those 2 neighborhoods primarily that will feed into Bryson subdivision, Elementary 29. It's not Bryson Elementary. One thing we noticed as we looked out for 5 elementary schools and trying to provide Aiken with long-term relief is Elementary 30 is going to play a key role in stabilizing Aiken Elementary. And so, Elementary 30 right now, and these, of course, we're not zoning for elementaries 30, 31, 32, or 33. That's strictly exercises looking at catchment areas of potentially what could be done in the future. And so Elementary 30 is projected to be needed down there around the Rancho Brushy Creek area. And so as you pull neighborhoods over to 30, what that does is rotates. I'm trying to see if this pointer, it really doesn't work. If you look at the neighborhoods around Cox Elementary, those 2 are actually from Reed Elementary. They go over to Reed, but they're very close to Cox. And then you rotate over the kids that were at Cox. Now they go to Reagan, and then Reagan kids feed into Elementary 30. They're a lot more aligned with their neighborhood schools. And as you can see, what we were trying to show here was on the where you pull in Elementary 30, what it does long-term for elementary, or for Aiken Elementary. I'm going to pull this up on my handy-dandy sheet here. What it shows you, Aiken long-term gets up to 923 kids, I believe. I don't have my glasses to read that, so as you can imagine, it's small. So, and then one thing we've done different this time is we actually provided 10 years worth of data for all the schools to show full impact as schools come online, as well as, you can see the bar after 25, 26, that's where we stop doing any more exercises, because as I mentioned, when you look at northwest part of our district and central part of our district, there are some large blocks that you really can't separate out to work the numbers and do any projections. So after we did those, we put it out for a thought exchange and got feedback. And so we sat there and got the feedback from thought exchange from November 10th. And of course, what you can see from the feedback, the feedback we got was from Cold Spring and Hazelwood. They're the primary respondents, but most feedback did come from the parents. And then they also, most agree the scenarios align with the board-approved charter at a rate of 57%. Of course, as I mentioned previously, school size, proximity, minimized change, and then feeder patterns. And the Cold Spring Hazelwood, their primary focus is on proximity and minimized change, number 2 and 3. What the 28 and 29, when you look at it, they sort of have probably more of a focus on number 1 and 4. And so then, of course, elementary 29A, they are centered around the Summerlin neighborhoods being zoned out of Larkspur Elementary School. So after we got to our initial feedback, we actually developed a little webinar or video that tried to explain the new process we use for the zoning with all the different exercises, because we published a lot of the exercises, but if you're not familiar with our new process, it was so hard to follow. So we did a video, walked through all the exercises and how we actually got to what we first showed of 28A and 29A. Then we got additional feedback from after our video, and at that point we actually developed scenarios 28B and 29B, which when you look at those, the primary difference now in 28B left Cold Spring and Hazelwood at Aiken Elementary. And so that you can see, and it as what that has is it's a large block that's now not going to Pleasant Hill, so people that were originally projected to move, they stay at Pleasant Hill, and you just rotate everybody back around. And so then for 29A, or 29B, excuse me, what we did was previously when we had all of Summerlin going to elementary 29, what you end up with over the long, full 10 years, you end up with almost a 316 student difference between Larkspur and elementary 29, with elementary 29 be a larger school. And so what we looked at here, excuse me, was leaving one of the components of Summerlin neighborhood sections at Larkspur, and then it actually, what you can see is now we're between Larkspur and elementary 29, we're now 30 students difference instead of 316. So long term, the schools are almost identical in enrollment, and we were able to keep one of the neighborhoods components or sections of Summerlin at Larkspur. And of course, let's see, and this is just looking at elementary 30 again with 28B, and what we'll end up doing, most likely you can see now you're going to have part of the Vista Oaks in Mayfield being most likely pulled down to elementary 30 in the event this was to work out. The projected growth occurs as it's actually projected right now. So there's still a couple years before, and we know data can change very quickly in our district. And again, you can see from the data, long term, I will say, you can see there in 2930, you're probably still going to need to look at another solution for the Aiken community just to give them additional relief as they get just over 1,000 students projected at that time. And again, we provided the full 10 years of all the schools coming online to help people understand the full impact in what we might see down the road. So what you could see from our virtual town hall meetings, which were on February 2nd and 4th, we asked for a quick survey afterwards, and again, the primary response was the heaviest ones were organized around proximity and change, as most of the people that gave us feedback through the chats and questions were dealing with Cold Spring Hazelwood. And you can see they were very supportive of scenario B, keeping them in Aiken. And then the Vista Oaks and West did share some concern potentially about being rezoned elementary 30 and 23 or 24 to the Rancho Bridge Creek side. And then we did hear a small amount of concern about the overcrowded at Aiken, but not specific to a neighborhood. So with all the community feedback that we've gotten, and right now we appear to have majority of the constituents or citizens happy, and so we are recommending 28B for Tarvin Elementary for the 21-22 school year, and then 29B for Elementary 29 for the 22-23 school year, or the year the campus opens, because that decision hasn't been made yet. With that, we always have transfer exceptions to allow incoming fifth graders to a zoned new school to have the choice to stay at their previously zoned school along with any of their siblings. And of course, if they do take advantage of that, they are responsible for providing their own transportation to the school. And again, with Elementary 29, we'd have the same requirements for that school also as far as transfer exceptions. Any questions or discussions?
Thanks, Jimmy. Appreciate the work that's gone into this. I think moving to 28B has helped to satisfy an important part of our community, and so applaud the efforts to do that. I think I have essentially two areas of question or comment. First is, as I look at the 10-year outlook, one of the things I'm looking for is persistent overutilization of the same campus, right? I expect to see some campuses grow into the red and then find resolution and then move forward and continue to grow. One campus that stood out to me just a little bit was Blockhouse Creek. It's a bit of a unique situation. The functional capacity is, I think, significantly below the physical capacity. So I wondered if you could talk just a little bit about the plans for that campus in this 10-year plan. Are we going to be able to maintain the programs, the special programs that are there, or how will we deal with the number of students that appear to be zoned there based on the functional capacity?
Yes. As we were working through this process, we looked at the same thing, and Blockhouse definitely stood out. And I've had discussions with Matt and his team, and when you look at that, as you mentioned, the functional capacity is extremely low at that campus. And so you look at what programs are there, and are there better locations for some of those programs at, at our underutilized campuses? Can you rotate those around to better utilize those facilities, but then also provide the relief at Blockhouse? And so Matt and his team have been working real hard on looking at options to do just that, because as you mentioned, we've got to do something. I mean, we looked at with Pleasant Hill, if you have some room there by not moving Cold Spring Hazelwood, can you take part? But you're going to take it right out of Blockhouse. I mean, Blockhouse is very dense, and so it's going to be extremely challenging to rezone that area very easily. And so we said, let's look at the functional capacity side and see if we can get that up to accommodate the students that are there. And so as we're moving forward, we're looking at that currently.
Okay, so it sounds like there's maybe some future plans that'll address that without rezoning and those sorts of things.
Exactly.
Okay, so second question for me, I spent a little time looking at feeder patterns. Feeder patterns don't really control our zoning decisions, but they certainly are informative in terms of some of the effects. And I think there were a couple of campuses that stood out to me that maybe aren't front and center in this zoning exercise. I would point your attention to, and I'm trying to find the slide here so that I don't have to do it from memory, and I think I've gone past them. Fabian was one, because we have a very small number, I think 10% or less, whether you look at 28B or 29B, moving to one middle school and the rest, the other 90% going to a different middle school. And so I had concern over the small splinter group from a feeder pattern perspective. And then Blockhouse was the other one where it looks like there's one neighborhood code that represents about 3% of Blockhouse Creek that goes to Henry, the rest goes to Wiley. And so I'm particularly concerned about looking out for those students and those families where such a small cohort would move, and wondered if maybe there's a solution for those families to help ensure that they don't feel isolated by that move.
Yeah. Those were actually, I don't know if you remember, back when we did the middle school zoning and really tried to clean up the feeder pattern, they were a heavy part of that discussion at that point, and we actually reached out to those families, and they wanted that. They wanted to stay at those campuses, and that's why you have that small cohort. They did not want to, the Fabian kids, they didn't want to be switched to their normal. They wanted to stay where they were. And then over at the Blockhouse, going down to Henry, it's a small group, and they leave us here, we're quite happy. And so that's why they stayed like that.
Well, maybe my recommendation or my request then is that we simply validate that with that group of families again, that's still their desire because of the relatively small cohort we're creating there.
And just to make sure, we didn't change any of the Blockhouse or Fabian numbers. Those were sustained or were there already, but we'll be happy to reach out just to see if there are any concerns.
Jimmy, on 28B, we look out for 1680 and 1675, which is long overdue in my opinion. And I'm trying to keep up with this. Does 29B also protect 1680 and 1675, or we just bought them 1 year?
That's 29 is just the next year for 29 elementary, and it is only really affects the Bryson and Summerlin areas.
Got it. And it's probably one of the crummiest decisions as a board member you have to make to tell families that they're going to go to a different school. It's never easy. It's never fun. But we've heard from several families, and a lot of us been doing this for a minute. I think part of the criteria moving forward, we need to look at how many times we're moving a family, and that needs to get a priority all its own. If we've moved a family twice while their child is trying to go to elementary school, that needs to move to the top of the priority somehow. And I would not ever want to get into what y'all do to bring this thing together. I'm amazed, and I appreciate the effort that goes into this, but at the same time, we have to get out of our own way sometimes, and if we're moving families twice during elementary school, that should be enough. So just a note for future discussions as we go through there, limit the number of times that we're moving a neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that's why we've had that in the charter.
So I had a question. The numbers for Blockhouse Creek, do they indicate also the new development that is being implemented in front of Blockhouse Creek that the city council just passed? Because that's going to create even more. And so I guess my next question is, we know that there's students and families coming, and we see Blockhouse Creek, and there's talks of utilizing other campuses. Are we going to provide transportation? How is that going to affect that community? Because people moved to Blockhouse Creek because of Blockhouse Elementary. That is a neighborhood school. So I'm just concerned how that's going to affect those families, because that's a pretty tight-knit circle.
Yes. As far as future projects, our demographer, I can go back and look at the exact neighborhood code, and they will list all future projects that are included with the new numbers they're projecting. And they're very good about, getting in all the details. I mean, we have questions all the time during zoning about, do you have this, this, this? And we can just go down the list and provide it. But I'll double check, but I'm very confident they're going to have it. And so I don't know if Matt wants to talk about some of the Blockhouse and some of the programs that, I don't know if he's been.
Correct. That's fine. And let's stay, I understand we're looking at others, but let's make sure we're all concentrating what we're voting on as well, because that's coming up on Thursday. Okay. Anything else? All right. Thank you very much, Jimmy. We'll move on to item 8C5, the bond election scenario discussion. This is the one that we were actually going to have at our other meeting, and we moved it.
Yep, we said we'll do it next time.
Little did we know next time it was going to get postponed as well.
Yep. It's an omen. Okay. Back on January 14th, Dr. Gearing did an exercise over on the side that sort of laid out timeline of a bond and how different things impacted in the different phases of it, just to help everybody understand how, a project, if you need it 4 years from now, when you have to start, and how, if you shuffle something, how it dominoes down the line. And so what we really were just trying to do is bring into light of the different scenarios as you move forward with our CFAC and the possibility of due bond elections, either November of 2021 or May of 2022, or even November of 2022, and the impact. A lot of people will talk about the size of a bond election, but you really also have to consider the impact of the operating side of the budget, because as you go out and build and open these schools, it has a huge impact to our operating side. So we were just trying to create basically some summary of different scenarios and trying to show the impact of how many schools are in a bond, and then how many, what impact that has from an operating side on each year. And I will say, opening 2 campuses should have been orange and not okay, because that's going to have a tremendous impact on an operating budget by itself. And so, I don't know that I'll go down every single scenario, because it's, the backup to these things. But if you look at what, the typical PASA, you'd have 4 elementaries, a middle school, and a high school. And as we've talked previously, with some of the school of choice, and if you can strategically locate those and get them in the right timing, you can delay high school 7 out of the window of a bond election. And so potentially you could have, instead of a high school, you have 3 school of choices. And financially, it's probably going to save you $90 million to $100 million in the cost of that bond election. And then, so as you go down, you can see, when you get down to scenario 4, going into May 22nd, 2022, you now will have 5 elementaries, middle school, a high school, and still potentially 3 school of choices if you're trying to get those in there into the incorporation. Because, even though you're not going to, get the high school out of that next bond election on scenario 4, you will have the potential of totally eliminating high school 8 further down the line. Because, as to remind you, the demographer said after high school 7, we're going to be looking at about 1,700 high school kids that need to be, housed somewhere. And so strategically, in trying to plan, if we can have some of these school of choices and the community feels they're important enough to include them from the high school subcommittee, then we have the potential to take off high school 8 totally being needed. And then, we can still delay the high school potentially 2 years, maybe even 3. It just depends on the growth. And so you can see, from a size of, if you're concerned with the size of the bond election, if you get into scenario 4 or 6, it's probably substantially increased because you've added a high school and an elementary school into the mix. And, it's, potential, a comprehensive high school is excess of $200 million, and you have a middle school or an elementary, you've jumped the price of that bond election substantially. And so you just have to sit there and really consider the different options as you move forward. what it might entail. And of course, you can see down at the bottom, the last three scenarios are where the students don't return, and the first three are where the students do return. And so we really just were trying to show the differences between different options in, as we get into the CFAC more, we're going to have dollars associated with these projects, and this will help you down the road when you're looking at different timelines and understanding, well, if we go ahead and push it, you'll have a better understanding. We're probably going to add more schools into the picture now, so cost of bond would actually go up. And so there's just a lot of different details that play into this, but I think from an operating, it's really concerning when you look at some of these options and you have to open up 3 schools 1 year, and another option, you look at scenario 4, potentially opening 4 schools and a school of choice in 1 year. Financially, it's probably something that can't be done in our district. And so, I've seen other districts over the years that have done just that. They push off something, and then you end up with, you can build it, but you can't open them. You can't afford to open the schools. And so it's a planning tool to try to help everybody understand the differences.
Board members?
Just an observation. I didn't check this against the version that Dr. Gearing showed a month ago, but it looks to me like in the presentation here, 5 and 7 are identical. I don't remember that was the case, and I don't think that's intentional. So there may be an error in this slide in terms of those 2 scenarios. And if I read it correctly, 5 and 7 indicate COVID impact students don't return, but 6 does include the return of those students, according to the description here. So just a point of clarification. And then I had one other comment. We've talked for a long time about schools of choice, and I think broadly the board is very supportive of that concept and that direction. I think the challenge is we don't yet have, excuse me, we don't yet have very clear direction about what that means. And I, for one, would feel uncomfortable going to our community for a November bond election that included schools of choice if we haven't defined what that's going to look like. Whether we're asking for 1 or 2 or 3, I think we need to have a level of definition about what that school of choice is so that our community can understand what we're asking them to support in the bond issue. So I should say in the bond election. So for me, I'm trying to weigh how do we get enough detail around schools of choice so that we can include something related to schools of choice in the bond election. If we're trying to do it in November, that's a lot of work to do between now and then. And so I'm not sure if I'm confident that we can get that level of detail together in time for a November bond election. So is November practical if we want to include schools of choice, or do we need to think without schools of choice for November?
So you want to have a go, Jimmy?
Well, I was just going to say I think some of the thought was a lot of the discussion would come from the community of what they were wanting to have, giving them some choice on what do they think they want to have in this package, if it's going to be considered. And so we were really looking to get community input of what school of choice, if there's going to be any, what are you looking to get involved or get included in this package? And so that's where we were looking to get community input from the CFAC on, do we want school of choice, and if so, what are they recommending?
I'm all for soliciting community input through the CFAC and otherwise, right? We've talked about that for a long time, and I think that's important. But I think, we're the experts, right? We're the professionals, and we should be bringing ideas, recommendations, options to our community and allowing them to tell us what they like or what they don't like, what they would support and what they wouldn't support. And then ultimately, I think it comes back to this board to say, based on the feedback, here are the things that we think are priorities. And I don't know if it's one school of choice or 3 schools of choice. I don't know, because I don't know what our community is going to tell us. But at the same time, I expect our education professionals to, and us as a board together, to take the community some recommendations, some ideas. We've got to seed this conversation with our expertise, right?
Yeah, Aaron, I think you're exactly right, and I think for us it's about timing. So it's not like we haven't thought about what the schools of choice are or have developed some behind-the-scenes research and plan, but we don't want to put that in front of the community. We want to go to the community and have some conversation about what does this potentially look like, and make sure that we're listening to all the ideas. And as those ideas come to the table, then we're prepared to provide the resource behind, here's fleshing out what that might look like, or here's opportunities. So I appreciate Jimmy, because he's doing a great job of making sure that we're putting all of these ideas together and on the table so that we can bring them in front of the community, so that we can have these conversations, and then we'll be ready as those topics come to the table to flesh them out and really work out the details just like you've described.
I think one of the things I recall hearing from some of our members on the bond committee is, did they feel like they had a real voice in the process and what the ultimate recommendations were coming? And I've heard a desire, we've seen it in our charter, that we're going to be doing minutes, and we're really going to be focusing on letting our community drive these conversations.
You're correct on that.
But at the same time, and to Aaron's point, it's very, very important that the board is intimately involved in this conversation from the beginning, which is partly why I started with this idea of these should be posted board meetings. Well, the problem we ran into is if a quorum of board members doesn't show up for some reason, then we can't have the meeting. So we're posting them as committee meetings, but we're posting them 72 hours in advance. We're going to live stream them so that all board members can watch those meetings if they want to, and I strongly encourage you to do so, because when you hear those conversations firsthand, that's when it makes your job when you come back in the boardroom that much not easier, because those are still difficult decisions to make, but you're much better informed about what the conversations have been leading to this point of decision. So very firmly the decision's going to be here in the boardroom. But we want to make this as wide open and as transparent as possible. And we're prepared as the professionals to guide the community and then the board ultimately through this process. We want to just make sure that we're not driving to some predetermined destination, but that we're really listening to what the needs of the community are.
I think that's good. I'm a little, I guess I'm just trying to understand how it begins, right? Because if we start with kind of a blank slate and we go to the community and say, wait, we would like to offer schools of choice. What do you want? Are we just expecting the community to feed us with a bunch of ideas? Is this community brainstorming at this stage? Or are we bringing the community a list of 7 ideas or 7 options to begin the conversation and ask them to comment on those or take those in a new direction? Or how is this going to work?
So we have, continuous improvement tools that we'll be bringing to the table in this process, but we don't want to present a set of ideas that limits anybody's thinking. There may be thoughts out there that we don't know about or haven't thought about. I want to make sure that we don't close the door to any of those. So does it have to be an expedited process? Yes. November is close if that's what we end up deciding to do. But that's what we're prepared to do, and it didn't help that we have to postpone it a week because of the weather challenge we had, but that's what Jimmy and his team are prepared to do, is to put these tools on the table, start really listening to the community, and very quickly then refining those ideas. That doesn't mean, Aaron, that we won't present ideas as that becomes necessary, because we are prepared to bring those ideas to the table to say, here's all the things we've got on the table, but have you thought about these other ideas? I just don't want to start in that position and limit the thinking.
We might need a couple more tries at the conversation throughout our meetings to kind of see how the progress is going. I also understand too, board is going to be heavily involved in more discussions on our strategic plan. We'll also be talking about our community-based accountability, so I think all these things kind of start rolling together at some point. Is that correct, Dr. Gehring?
Yes, ma'am. So all of these pieces are very closely aligned to each other, and that's what we'll start to see as we progress through the spring, is all of these pieces coming together as we examine and look at what do we want learning to look like in the district over time, and then what kinds of facilities make sure that that learning is possible.
So I want to make sure, because I think we got to 3 school of choices because of impartiality, because of New Hope High School, and them needing bigger facilities.
So again, we have 3 schools of choices on the piece of paper, but that doesn't mean that's where we end up. That makes sense based on the numbers and what the need will be based on the demographic study that we have at this time. But that's part of what we want to make sure is that we put all of that information in front of the committee and really have those robust conversations about. So if this is the student demographic and this is what happens, here are the different ways that we can solve for this problem. And we start to make sure that we lay all those out. You'll notice that number 1 here is what PASA recommends. So what we could easily do is go through the process, and we know how to do this, and we can get it done super efficiently. But is that what we truly want for this community as we go forward? That's the question that we're asking. We started this conversation, if you'll remember, with our community conversations by asking, what are your hopes and dreams for your children? And as we follow the thread through that conversation, long-range facility planning becomes a critical part of that and what that looks like.
All right, thank you, Jimmy. We'll move on, speaking of, to items 8.6C, the Citizen Facility Advisory Committee update.
Yes, as Dr. Gehring did mention, we did postpone tomorrow night's kickoff meeting till March 2nd at 6 p.m. We are trying to get additional volunteers, and so for the subcommittees, and so we're working hard to get all the subcommittees filled. As far as our steering committee, we do have, I think the county, we're still waiting for one representative, if they want to put somebody on from Williamson County, and then also from the city of Leander, the city council / mayor. We're trying to get one from them. We've gotten one from pretty much everybody else, and I think I have one left on high school feeder pattern to confirm, but that's all we're lacking. So we'll have a good group there, and then we'll be kicking it off. As Dr. Gehring did mention, everything will be posted and like a board meeting 72 hours prior, and we'll have the agenda posted and any materials that are going to be presented posted up on the website as well. So everybody has access to the information, and we'll be streaming it live. So we hope to hear from you.
So we are still looking for a significant number of volunteers for those subcommittees, and so that's been a very challenging time the last couple of weeks to get folks to even think about anything other than taking care of their basic needs. But as folks are looking for ways to support and help the district, this is a great opportunity for us to really shape the future of Leander ISD. And so we do urge folks to step up and come and help us with these subcommittees. Jimmy, you want to just lay out what those subcommittees are?
Yes. Of course, we have the high school, the middle school, the elementary, then information technology, and then ancillary services. SCR did put out a call for volunteers again, and so there's a link on the website to sign up, and they'll ask you for your priority as far as what subcommittee you'd like to serve on, and we'll rank them 1 through 5 because, we're trying to get the distribution by feeder pattern, say for high schools, 8 from each high school feeder pattern to get representative, so we have equal representation across each feeder pattern. And so if they don't get their first choice, what's their second choice? And, we just go down the list and try to accommodate where they want to serve, but at the same time, we want to make sure we get equal representation across the district.
Have you reached out to our PTA and PTO leaders to see if they're willing to serve? Because, there are boots on the ground. They know their campus better than most of us do, and I know a lot of them are eager to help. I'm just curious if that connection's been made.
We'll make sure, SER has been reaching out, trying to get, but I'll make sure they do send something directly to those leaders and say, hey, love to get some help.
Do we know what the expectation is for them as far as commitment that we're asking? Is it one night a week, or how often are we?
Well, actually, on subcommittees, they set their own schedule for the most part. They know what the end date is in mind, and so they will start working. And I mean, in the past, you could have one meeting a week, sometimes 2 meetings a week. It really, we leave it up to the subcommittee and the members to set their schedule, because everybody's busy, and so they work amongst everybody and set their schedule. But it's busy, you know, for the next couple of months, it'll be busy for them.
Jimmy, if you can tell us a little bit, maybe in a memo Friday or by email or otherwise, what the gaps are from a recruitment perspective for those subcommittees. I'm sure we can network to folks to try and help resolve that as well, if we just know what you're targeting.
Okay, which ones? Will do.
All right, thank you, Jimmy. We'll move on to item 8C7, general construction update.
Okay, real quick. This will be fairly quick. I do want to mention, as far as general construction update, Thursday night we will have an agenda item for Tarvin Elementary. It'll be GMP 3, which is actually going to be the fiber to connect our fiber ring from Larkspur to Tarvin, but because there's only one board meeting at the end of March, they will need approval because it's time sensitive to make sure we get fiber into Tarvin, which provides phone data, our control systems, et cetera. So it's real important, but we will be bringing that Thursday, and I just want to make sure from Tarvin Elementary, it's a critical component. In the past, we haven't done the fiber ring through construction, but we actually did bring it into construction this time because it's such a long run, and it goes across the river, it goes through new roads. I mean, it's a long run, and so we thought it'd give some extra controls on that. So we worked with technology and worked together and got that bid through construction. So we will have that part of the GMP coming up. Tarvin is going very well. For the most part, it's almost all dried in, and we'd be happy here in the near future if it's now where you can see different phases. You can start seeing where walls are going. Now you can see open spaces. It's a whole realm. So if ever anyone wants to get a tour, just let us know. Get with Dr. Garing's office, and we'll get one scheduled to take y'all out there and just to get a tour, just to see the progress of the Tarvin Elementary. They made some really neat pictures of the snow out there. So the other day, and we toured it, I guess, just before the break, Wednesday, actually. Yeah. So it was definitely chilly, but, a lot of good things. You can see some of our types of what we do in construction to long-term sustainable and protect long-term things.
Yeah, and when you tour it at this stage, then you get to see things that disappear after this. So, the maintenance mezzanines and things like that are visible now, but disappear after this, and then you don't even know they're there. So you really get to see the guts of the building. It's a fascinating process. I think the thing that struck me the most is we build enough elementary schools in this district that we continuously improve them. And so the changes they're making every time are phenomenal to watch, and just to listen to the excitement in James Conkle's voice about the improvements that they've made even over Larkspur into Tarvin, and then continue to do that. It's a fascinating process.
Yeah. Just let us know. The rest of the Cedar Park Middle School in Steiner and Vista Ridge, those are projects that, Cedar Park and Steiner, their phases are this summer to finish those. And then Vista Ridge, we're hoping to wrap the final part of that up during spring break.
So I'm just wondering now if this might not be a good place for us to bring the updates on the work that we're having to do now because of the winter storm. This might be a good place for us to just plug all that information.
That would be great.
The repair work that we're doing because of the storm.
just to talk about it?
Yeah, we just plug it into this construction update. So
Okay.
that there's it
Add
just
it
seems
on to
like
the
a
back
right
of this.
place to do that.
Yeah,
So we can know what is insurance, what we're covering, all that good stuff.
we'll try creating a little spreadsheet that,
That'd be great. Something to think about, not now at this point, but at some point, we did the ribbon cutting for Larkspur. We did not do that for Danielson because of COVID. At some point, we need to do something. I don't know, but it definitely feels missed, so I don't want to let it go too long. But of course, the COVID restrictions will have to be careful. But at some point, we might have to just figure out how we do it with a COVID restriction in place. So.
I believe Corey and his team have been reaching out and talking with Mark and Danielson family, trying, from what I remember, they're trying to, where more kids are there, and, I seem to remember it was going to be for, start of next year, because of,
Right.
hopefully you have the kids there, because
Yes, we
it's so
want-
empty, it's,
Well-
they want to.
We want it to be safe and secure as well. So really, whatever the timing works. I just didn't want to let it get off the radar as we moved on.
I believe Corey's been, and Mark's been having a conversation with the Danielsons to make sure we keep them in the conversation and help us.
Tremendous. And then one other question, we had talked about this, Jimmy, which is that one time we were talking about naming our elementary school, and I know our policy committee will probably be looking at the naming process for elementary schools, so policy committee, get ready, because I think there's things coming y'all's way at some point. But the other thing that happened is, as we were talking about how we were going to name our elementary school, we had the discussion of how many people there were that we could honor in our district. And there was a discussion of, is there a wall or is there something available? And Jimmy, you said this might be a good place to remind you, and let's just keep that on the radar of what can we do for a memory location or wall or some sort at some point in the future.
Identify something in some of our facilities, of try to get something that's uniform through facilities, different facilities. That's the main thing. So it's clear.
All right, if there are any other questions, we will now move. I know you are going to pinch yourselves. We will now be moving. It is 8:57, and we are moving to closed session for purposes permitted by Texas Government Code 551.071, consultation with attorney regarding pending or contemplated litigation and our attorney-client privilege matter. Texas Government Code 501.074, deliberation regarding resignation, termination, employment, assignments, duties, and evaluation of personnel and public officers. Texas Government Code 551.0821, deliberation regarding matters whereby personally identifiable information regarding one or more students will be disclosed. There will be no action taken in closed session. We will return to open session for any action.
All right, it is 9:05 p.m. and we are back in open session. Board members, do we have a motion?
Second.
Got to say the motion first. Appreciate the enthusiasm.
I'm just trying to keep us here longer, y'all know that. Sorry.
Jim was seconding your request for a motion.
I motion that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendations for teacher employment contract for personal additions as presented in accordance with the salary scale, policies, and contract of Leander Independent School District for the 2020-21 school year.
Second.
I have a motion from Anna, second from Jim. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 7 ayes, no nays, motion carries. That's it for the motions, right? All right, well, without further objection then, I'm sure y'all all would love to stay and chat some more. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Y'all have a good evening.